Have you ever wondered what games would be played if Squid Game took place in your country? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. What specific childhood games each country would have. This is based solely on research, so please go easy on me if I get something wrong about a country. For each country, I will select 3 games, and I'll try my best to avoid games that were already featured in Squid Game, since almost every country has its own version of red light, green light, Tug of War, or Marble. Also, please be patient with my pronunciation. I'll try to be as accurate as possible, but some of these game names are really tricky to pronounce. So let's start with some African countries. People often leave them for last, but we want to show them some love right from the beginning. If Squid Game were played in South Africa, one possible game they might use is Mbube Mbube. To play this game, the players form a large circle. 2 players are chosen, one to be the lion and the other to be the impala. Both are blindfolded and spun around several times. After that, the lion must hunt the impala and try to tag them. The players in the circle chant Mbube Mbube to guide the lion. If the lion gets closer to the impala, the chanting gets louder and faster. If the lion moves away, the chanting becomes softer and slower. If the lion fails to tag the impala within a time limit, the lion is eliminated. But if the lion successfully hunts the impala, they survive, and the impala is killed instead. This would make an interesting Squid Game challenge because players could cheat while chanting, either helping the lion by giving exact directions, or, in a more twisted move, misleading them, so a specific player gets eliminated from the competition. Moving on, we have 3 Toti. This game is played in teams. One team is called the Ballers, while the other is called the Fielders. Each team stays at one end of the playground, and in the middle, there are 3 tin cans piled up in a pyramid shape. The Ballers have 3 attempts to knock down the tins. If a baller knocks down the tins, they must run and restack them as they were originally arranged. Meanwhile, the Fielders have their own balls, and their goal is to stop the Ballers from reassembling the tins by throwing the ball at them. If the Ballers do not restack the tins after 3 attempts, 1 point is awarded to the Fielders. If the Ballers successfully restore the tins, they receive 3 points. The challenging part for the Fielders is that they can only throw the ball from outside the play area. If their attempt fails and the ball lands inside the play area, they must retrieve the ball and return outside before they can start throwing again. At the end of the game, the team with the most points wins, and the other team is eliminated. For the last game for South Africa, we have Jukske. The object of the game is to knock over a peg that is planted in a sandpit. Usually, this game is played in teams, but I think the Squid Game version would have players compete one-on-one. Each player has 2 skis, 2 turns. The playing field consists of 2 pits juxtaposed in opposite directions, so that play can take place in both directions. Each time a player knocks over the peg, they score 3 points. If the peg isn't knocked over, the player whose skis are closest to the peg scores 1 point for every ski that is closer than their opponent's nearest ski. The first player to reach exactly 23 points wins the game. However, if a player exceeds 23 points, their score resets to 0. This twist adds an extra layer of challenge. One player could be in total advantage, leading with 15 points, and at the end, he would make a mistake that would force him to start over and eventually lose the game. I think there would be a lot of potential variants of this game that would be very entertaining to watch. We continue our journey to Nigeria, where we find ourselves playing after round 1, a game somewhat similar to rock, paper, scissors. This game can also be played in teams, but if it were played in the Squid Game, I am more inclined to think that it would be played one-on-one rather than in groups. To play this game, each player chooses a number between 0 and 10. Then, a specific song starts playing, and when the song ends, each player uses one hand to display a number of fingers, any number they want. The goal is for the sum of the fingers to equal your chosen number. In the traditional game, if you lose, you get slapped by the winner. But for the Squid Game version, I think the winner would be awarded 1 point. If the sum doesn't correspond to either player's number, then the player who is closest to the sum wins that round. The game would be played within a time limit, and at the end of the time, the person with the most points would survive and advance. Another possible game from Nigeria is 10-10. This game is played one-on-one and takes turns. A song starts, and when it ends, one player lifts one of their legs. If the opponent lifts the same leg, then the opponent wins a point. At the end, the player with the most points wins. The last possible game from Nigeria is called Langa, which is very similar to Squid Game. Langa is played in rounds. In each round, one player from each team, known as the Rua, point scorer, attempts to reach a designated area on the opponent's side to score a point for their team. In this game, the Ruas, and all other players, must hop on one foot while holding their other foot with one hand. If an opponent dislodges the hand holding the foot, that player is eliminated from that round. Moving into Asia, let's start this game list with India. One possible game for this country could be Gilli Danda. This game is played in teams, with one side acting as strikers and the other as fielders. The required items are 2 sticks, a larger one called the danda, which is used to hit the smaller one called the gilli. The gilli is placed inside a circle, and the striker uses the danda to lob it into the air before striking it while it's airborne. If a fielder catches the gilli, the striker is ruled out. However, if the gilli lands safely on the ground, the distance between it and the center of the circle is measured using the danda. Each danda length is equal to 1 point, meaning the striker's team scores as many points as the number of times the danda fits within that distance. If a striker fails to hit the gilli in 3 consecutive attempts, they are ruled out. At the end, the team with the most points wins and survives the game. The second possible game is Ko-Ko. This game is played on a rectangular court with a center line and 2 poles at either end. Again, we have a team game, usually with 9 players. One team is the chasing team, while the other is the defending team. 8 out of the 9 players from the chasing team sit on the center line, facing alternating directions, while the 9th player, the chaser, stands next to one of the poles. 3 defenders from the defending team then enter the court. The goal of the game is for the chaser to tag the defenders. The challenge here is that while defenders can move freely across the center line, the chaser cannot. They are only allowed to run along one side of the rectangle. Once they start running, they cannot turn around unless they reach a pole and run around it, or they tag one of their seated teammates to switch places. The new chaser must then attempt to catch the defenders from their current position. Once all 3 defenders are tagged, they are eliminated, and another 3 defenders step into the game. When all 9 defenders are eliminated, the teams switch roles. The team that eliminates all 9 defenders in the shortest time wins and survives this challenge. The last game for India is Lagori, or 7 stones. Although we saw a similar concept in the 6-leg race from Squid Game, this version is played as a team game. 7 stones are stacked at the center of the playground. One team is tasked with knocking them down using a ball. Each player gets 3 attempts to hit the stones. If they miss all 3, it becomes the other team's turn to try. However, if a player successfully knocks the stones down, their team must rush to restack them exactly as they were before. Meanwhile, the opposing team must stop them by hitting their players with the ball from the torso down. A player holding the ball cannot move and must pass it to a teammate if they want to reposition the attack. If the team that knocked the stones down successfully restacks them before being eliminated, they score a point. If all their players are hit before completing the task, the other team earns a point. At the end, the team with the most points wins. Now let's explore some traditional Chinese games. One possible game for Squid Game in China could be Jianzi. We saw a similar game during the 6-legged race, but the main difference here is that Jianzi would be played one-on-one. This game is quite similar to Jegi from Korea, but in Jianzi, players can use any part of their body, except their hands, to keep the shuttlecock, Jianzi, in the air. In its competitive version, Jianzi is played on a court divided by a net, following rules similar to badminton or volleyball. The game could be structured so that the first player to reach a certain number of points wins and survives. Another interesting game could be Catch the Dragon's Tail. In this game, players are divided into teams, and stand in a single file line, holding onto the waist or shoulders of the person in front of them. The first player in the line represents the dragon's head, while the last player is the dragon's tail. The objective is for the dragon's head to catch the opposing team's dragon's tail, all while staying connected. If a player lets go of the person in front of them, their team loses. This game could create intense physical competition, as players must work together while trying to outmaneuver the other team. The last game from China would be Fingers Out, a game similar to After Round 1. 2 players face each other and count 1, 2, 3. On 3, they extend their right hand, either closed or with one or more fingers extended, while simultaneously shouting out a number. The goal is to correctly guess the total number of fingers shown by both players. The player who guesses the exact sum, or the closest to it, scores a point. This game could be played within a set time limit, with the player who accumulates the most points moving on to the next round. We continue our journey to the Philippines, starting with the game Tumbang Preso, which translates to Knock Down the Prisoner. This game requires an empty can, called a lata, which serves as the center of the game, and tisanelas, flip-flops, which players use to hit the can. As you might have guessed, the goal is to knock down the lata by throwing your tisanelas at it. If a player throws and misses, they must quickly run and retrieve their tisanelas. However, the challenge comes from another player called It, whose job is to tag the others while they attempt to recover their tisanelas. If the It player tags another player, that person becomes the new It. If this game were adapted into Squid Game, I imagine that instead of a player being It, there would be a doll, similar to Young Hee in Red Light, Green Light. The game would be played within a time limit, and if the doll detects movement at the wrong moment, or if a player fails to knock down the lata within the time frame, they would be eliminated. Next, we have Luksong Baka, which translates to jump over the cow. As the name suggests, this game involves jumping, but as easy as it seems, it can be equally deadly. In the childhood game, one kid is designated as the baka, named cow, and starts in a kneeling position. The other kids take turns jumping over the baka. After all players have completed one round of jumping, the baka player slightly raises their body for the next round. With each successful round, the height continues to increase, making it more difficult. The only rule for jumpers is that they may touch the baka's back with their hands for support, but any other contact, such as a knee touching or failing to clear the jump, results in elimination. If a player fails to jump successfully, they replace the baka and start the game over from a kneeling position. In a Squid Game setting, this challenge could become extremely dangerous, with jumps becoming increasingly high and failure resulting in immediate elimination. In the Squid Game variant of this game, the players must jump 3 obstacles, each one higher than the other, and they can only use their hands for support on the object they must jump over. If a player fails to avoid contact or falls over the obstacle, they would be eliminated. This would be a challenging game that would require stamina, power, and dexterity to pass. I imagine this game wouldn't be easy, and a lot of people would fail at it. The last game from the Philippines that we would discuss is called sipa. A sipa is usually made from a metal washer, about the size of a bottle cap, with strips of cloth or yarn attached to it. The goal of this game is to keep the sipa up in the air as long as possible, using only your feet, palms, and elbows. Sounds easy, right? I think a Squid Game variant would require each player to complete a set number of hits with each body part, 5 times with their feet, 5 times with their palms, and 5 times with their elbows. This game would be similar to the Yegi game from the 6-leg pentathlon. And for the last country in Asia, we have Japan. For the first Japanese game, we have Kagome Kagome. This is a children's game in which one child is chosen as the one and sits blindfolded. The other children join hands and walk in circles around the oni while chanting the song for the game. When the song stops, the oni must guess the name of the person standing behind them. If they are correct, that person will be killed. But if the oni is incorrect, they themselves will be brutally eliminated. I think the Squid Game version of Kagome Kagome would be very similar to this. One player would sit blindfolded while two guards and two random players form a circle around them. After the song ends, the blindfolded player must decide whether the person behind them is a player or a guard. If they guess incorrectly, they are eliminated. Another interesting game from Japanese culture that could be featured is Beigoma. Beigoma is a traditional Japanese spinning top game. In Squid Game, this would likely be played one-on-one. I imagine the players would be given the choice to pick their own Beigoma, similar to how they had to choose a shape for the Dalgona challenge. After selecting their top, they would compete, the winner being the player whose top spins the longest or successfully knocks the opponent's top out of the playing area. And for the last game, we have Otedama. This game is similar to Gongi and involves small cloth balls filled with dried beans or rice. The rules are the same as Gongi. The players would scatter the 5 beanbags on the floor, pick up one and toss it into the air. With the same hand, pick up another bag and transfer it to your other hand. Repeat until you have 4 beanbags in one hand and catch the thrown beanbag in the other. Scatter again. This time pick up 2 beanbags to transfer, and so on. I initially wanted to continue with Europe, but you've waited long enough, so I won't keep you guessing about my takes on the American Squid Game versions. I think Netflix announced that a spin-off is already in production, focusing on the Squid Game played in the USA. So, who knows? Maybe one of the 3 games I've selected will be featured in the original series. One of the games I think would fit perfectly is Dodgeball. Even though it's not originally from the USA, it would work well, because when it was first played approximately 200 years ago, it was actually a deadly game. The earliest version of this game was played in Africa, and instead of soft balls, players used large rocks or other hard objects found in nature. I think the Squid Game version would be something similar, players in a playground having to avoid deadly rocks. Another version could use soft balls equipped with motion detectors, and if a ball hits you, a sniper guard would eliminate you, just like in Red Light. Next, we have Duck, Duck, Goose. Players sit in a circle facing each other. One person is it and walks around the outside of the circle, tapping players' heads while saying whether they are a duck or a goose. Once someone is chosen as the goose, they must get up and try to chase the it player around the circle. The goal is for the goose to catch the player before they are able to sit in the goose's spot. If the goose fails, they become it for the next round, and the game continues. I think this would be played within a time limit, and once time runs out, the person who is it at that moment would be killed. This game could have multiple strategies. Maybe you can team up, maybe you can target the elderly in the group, or maybe you can wait until the last second to betray an ally. The possibilities are endless. And lastly, I think an interesting game would be Simon Says. I think everyone knows how to play this game. The name is pretty self-explanatory. You have to do what Simon says, or you die. If this game were in Squid Game, I imagine there would be another giant doll giving players instructions, and if they failed to follow them, they would be killed. Now let's move south to our Mexican neighbors and see what games they have prepared for us. One of their most popular children's games is called La Rueda de San Miguel. The children walk in a circle while holding hands. When a child's name is called, that child turns around in place and faces the outside of the circle. Play continues until all players are facing outward. I think a Squid Game version of this would be similar. Players would be divided into multiple groups. Once the groups are formed, there would be a set order in which each group plays. When the game starts, the players walk in a circle, and once the song ends, a player number is called. That player must turn around and face the outside of the circle. If they fail to do so within 10 seconds, they would be eliminated. Another high-thrill Mexican game could be Carrera de Carretillas, or simply put, wheelbarrow racing. Players would form teams of 2, one acting as the human wheelbarrow, while the other carries them by the legs. In this game, 2 pairs of players would compete against each other, randomly selected in the same way they did with Tug of War. The team that finishes the race first would win and survive the game. Lastly, we have Atrapa el Sombrero. In this game, all players wear a hat tied behind their back. When the game starts, participants will try to snatch the hats off their opponents. When time runs out, all players who lost their hats would be killed. This would make for an intense game because multiple people could team up against others. We could see betrayals. Maybe you think you're safe because your friends have your back. But surprise, surprise. With only 5 seconds left, your so-called friend decides to betray you, snatching your hat and eliminating you from the competition. This game would be wild with betrayals and plot twists. Continuing with the other American continent, let's see what Brazil has in store for us. And no, it wouldn't be soccer. It would be luta de galo. For this game, the players keep a handkerchief hanging from their waist and must hop on one leg while keeping the opposite arm stuck to their chest. Players lose if their raised foot touches the ground, if they allow their arm to come off their chest, or if their handkerchief is snatched by the opponent. The Squid Game version would work in a similar way. Before the game starts, the players would be informed that they need to form groups of 2 and compete against each other for a chance of survival. Another popular traditional children's game in Brazil is queimada, which is very similar to dodgeball. Bola de gude. This is a game where players flick marbles at other marbles to capture them, with the player capturing the most marbles by the end of the game winning, and bate ombro, which is the Brazilian form of cricket. I won't go into any more details about these games because the rules are very similar to the ones already mentioned. Now, moving into the old continent, I spent some time thinking about whether I should include all the countries or not, but the video would end up being too long to list all 50 countries. So I decided to only list the most popular ones: France, the United Kingdom, Spain, and Italy. If you want me to also make a video about the games from Eastern Europe, let me know in the comments, and I'll make a second part to this video. Let's start with France, and what better game to include than escargot, or hopscotch. Escargot is the French word for snail, which is why we have this spiral-shaped game as our next one. The challenge is pretty easy, but it's also quite deadly. The player needs to hop on one foot on each square around the entire spiral to the center and then back. Even though this doesn't seem very complicated at first glance, Squid Game could spice things up by adding a time limit, more squares than usual, or making the squares particularly small. If the players step on the line, put their leg down, or don't finish the challenge within the time limit, they would be eliminated. Another French game that would keep you on the edge of your seat is Le Loup-Garou, or Werewolf. Although this is more of a party game, the implications in the Squid Game social dynamic world would be absolutely crazy. Each player is assigned a role as either a villager or a werewolf. Villagers aim to identify and eliminate werewolves, while werewolves try to eliminate villagers without being caught. Each round consists of 2 phases: the day phase, where players discuss and vote on who to eliminate, and the night phase, where werewolves secretly choose their target. The game continues until one team wins. Imagine the debates, the betrayals, and the manipulation involved in winning this game. I'm sure that if this were included in the Squid Game and the writers did it right, it could be the most impactful game in the entire series. And lastly, I think we would have the game called Jeu de la Barbichette, the goatee game. This game is a little bizarre, but I'm sure it would be full of emotional impact and would really stress the players. The game is very simple, but maybe that's what makes it so complicated. The players have to sit across from one another, maintain eye contact, and grab each other's chins. They then have to hold on to their opponent's chin for the duration of the game, including while they sing a specific song. Once the song is finished, the first person to laugh or smile loses. Seems easy, right? But I am sure this oddly simple competition would be an incredible mental tool for the players. Also, Squid Game could give it a little twist and eliminate the player who cries, makes a sound, or has their chin trembling from fear. Going up north, let's see what games the Crown has prepared for us. If there were a United Kingdom version of Squid Game, then definitely one of the games would be Conkers. For those of you who don't know about this game, Conkers is played with chestnuts. Each player carves the nut and inserts a lace through it to make it look like a pendulum. This game is played player versus player, and the goal is to smash your opponent's conker. The players would do rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first, and each player gets 3 chances to smash the nut. If they fail, they pass the turn to the next player. To smash it, you need to aim at your opponent's chestnut. The player who successfully smashes the opponent's conker wins. Another possible game could be British Bulldog. In this game, 1 or 2 players are selected to be the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs stand in the middle of the playing field. All remaining players stand at one end of the area, home. The aim of the game is to run from one end of the playing field to the other without being caught by the Bulldogs. When players are caught, they become Bulldogs themselves. The last player remaining is the winner and starts the next game as the Bulldog. For the Squid Game version, I think this game would be played one-on-one. One player would be the Bulldog and one player would be the runner. If the Bulldog successfully stops the runner from reaching the end of the playing field, the Bulldog wins and the runner would be eliminated. And the last game from Great Britain would be Pick-Up Sticks. This game could be played with any group of players. If this game were in Squid Game, I think the number of players in each group would depend on how many players need to be eliminated. If they want to eliminate a high number of players, they would play one-on-one. But if they need to eliminate fewer players, they could group the players into teams of 4 or 5 participants. To play this game, you need a pile of sticks. The goal is to pick up a stick without touching or disturbing any of the other sticks. The players would take turns extracting one stick at a time, and the first player who touches another stick or moves a stick while removing another would lose and be eliminated. Let's move to a warmer country, and for our next destination, we have Spain. While researching this, I saw that the most popular children's games were variations of hopscotch, hide and seek, jump rope, or marbles, so I tried not to include those, since we've already seen similar variations in the previous countries we presented. This is why I decided that the first game from Spain could be El Pañuelo, the handkerchief game. For this game, players would be divided into 2 teams, and each player from each team would have a number associated with them. The teams stay at opposite ends of the court, and in the middle of them is a bandana. A song would play, and at the end of it, a number would be called, representing a player's number. For example, if the number 3 is called, then the player with number 3 from both teams is selected for that round of the game. The purpose of the game is that once the song finishes and the number is called, the player with the associated number must run to the center of the playground and grab the bandana. If they successfully grab it, they must hurry back to their team. If they reach home without the other player tagging them, their team gets 1 point. But if the opponent tags the player before they reach home, the enemy team gets 1 point. At the end of the game, the team with the most points wins and survives this challenge. Another possible game could be chapas. The mechanics are pretty simple. A racetrack is drawn, and players compete against each other using bottle tops. Again, this game could be played with 2 or multiple players, and Squid Game would decide the number of contestants based on how many players need to be eliminated. Let's say this game is played in groups of 3. Each player would choose a bottle top and play rock, paper, scissors to determine who goes first. Players take turns flicking their bottle caps toward the finish line. If you flick your chapa outside of the lines, you lose a turn. If someone flicks their chapa into yours, you must start over. The last player in this race would be eliminated. Unfortunately, for the third game, I didn't find a specific one that hasn't already been mentioned. Maybe if we have some Spanish viewers, they can enlighten us in the comments with some possible games. That's why, for the last Spanish game, I would add La Silla de la Reina. This is the Spanish version of musical chairs. Players would walk around chairs and must sit when the music stops. The one left standing would be killed. And for our last country in this video, we have Italy. And yes, we would have some food-related games. One ancient traditional Italian game is called Rizzola, or rolling the cheese. In ancient times, this game was played using a real wheel of seasoned pecorino cheese. But for Squid Game, I think a wooden cylinder would do. As the name suggests, this game involves a race. There would be a pre-established path, and a fixed point that players need to reach. The player who reaches that point with the fewest number of tries would win and survive this game. If the player strays from the path, their turn is skipped, and they must redo the throw from the previous point in the race. Another possible game could be bocce ball. This game is a marble variant, but with some twists. This game can also be played in teams, but I think for Squid Game, this game would be played one-on-one. In this game, each player receives 4 bocce balls, and the goal is to roll your bocce balls closer to the pallino, the smaller target ball, than the other player's bocce balls. Now here are the specific rules for this game. Players' feet must be behind the foot fault line. The ball must be thrown underhand and roll beyond the half-court line. The ball cannot touch the back wall unless it makes contact with the ball in play first. And for the last game, we have Lupo Mangia Fruta, or Fruit Eating Wolf. The children's game mechanics are as follows. One kid is selected to be the wolf, who will stand a few feet away from the rest of the players while they choose the fruits they are going to be. Once they've chosen, they will form a line behind the wolf. Then they will chant, and the wolf will say, "Knock, knock." The fruit will respond, "Who is it?" The wolf responds, "The fruit-eating wolf." And the fruits ask, "Which fruit do you want?" The wolf will say which one it wants. The fruit that is chosen must run away from the wolf, but if it is caught, they lose and are out of the game. I think the Squid Game version would be something like this. Players would be placed in front of a big screen with the wolf animation, and before them would be a table with 4 possible buttons, each representing a fruit. The chant would begin, and by the end of the song, the players must choose one of the fruits. After the chant ends, the wolf would pick a fruit and display that fruit on the screen. All players who selected that fruit would be killed. This game has a 75% survival rate, but if you play 4 or 5 rounds, things could get interesting. Would you select the same fruit twice in a row? Would you select the fruit that was previously chosen? And there are a lot of ways to mess with players' heads and make this game thrilling. So that's all for today's video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about the games in your country? Do you think they would have a chance to be in Squid Game? And if not, what kid games would be best featured in this deadly competition? If you liked this video, I could make a part 2 with the countries I didn't mention. So just let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching.